This will be a fairly in-depth review of the new Freedom Bluetooth earphones by Jaybird Sport. If you're looking for a 90-second video that just highlights features or show the earphones coming out of a box, this probably isn't the review for you. But if you're thinking about investing in these and you want some detailed information, stick around because I think you'll find this video helpful for you. This is the third pair of Bluetooth earphones that I've owned from Jaybird Sport. I've had the BlueBuds X, the X2, and now the Freedoms. And I'll have to say they keep improving with each iteration. These are probably the best Bluetooth earphones I've owned to date, and I would rate them perfect except for one issue that I've had, and I'll share that at the end of this video. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look. I want to start by showing what you get with these. First of all, in typical Jaybird fashion, you get a nice high quality box with a magnet closing lid. You get a pretty nice carrying bag with a spring snapping closure at the top. And this is pretty compact. As I do this review, I'm going to do a little bit of comparison to the X2s because the X2s are still made and some of you may be trying to decide which ones to go for. This case was a watertight case. It was a little bulky and the lid was sometimes a little hard to close. You had to snap it in perfectly and sometimes you would push it in too far and have to pull it back out. So like I said, that was a little bulky, but it was watertight, so that was kind of nice. I really don't have a complaint about this case other than the lid being a little difficult sometimes to put in. Just takes a little working that and to get it tight. So this bag is very nice. Like I said, it's got that spring enclosure at the top and it is pretty compact. So I'll get to the earphones themselves in a minute. You also get 3 different size Comply foam sport tips and you get 3 different size silicone tips. And I will say one thing really nice about these earphones is because the body is so small. Again, I'm going to make a reference here to the X2, so let's get these out. So in the past, the battery of the Jaybird Sport earphones has been actually in the earbud itself and the controller was kind of small. With the new ones, the controller has the battery, and so the earbuds are a lot smaller and a lot less bulky. So these are the first Jaybird Sport earphones that I've been able to use without the ear fins. Now I do use the ear fins and I'm going to talk about the earphones in a minute, but I can use these with just the silicone tips or the Comply foam sport tips and get the earphones to stay in my ears very well. Now when I do ride and I exercise and I move around a lot, I like the ear fins because it really holds them inside my ears. Now I do actually prefer the Comply foam comfort tips. They make the comfort, the isolation, and the sport, which is what you get with the new Freedoms. The sport are a little porous. They absorb sweat a lot so they don't get slimy when you sweat. But because they are porous, you don't get quite the bass response that you would get with the silicone tips. And so I prefer the silicone tips. And if I want to use the Comply foam, I actually ordered a pair of the comfort tips because again, those give a really tight seal and a really good sound isolation, which again gives a really good bass response. So these are actually the first Jaybird Sport earphones that I've been able to use the silicone tips. In the past, again, because the earbuds have been kind of bulky, I've had to use the ear fins even with the Comply foam sport. So these are the comfort tips. I have those on my X2, so that's what they look like. They're a little bit more round as opposed to the sport tips that you get with the Freedoms. So because the earbuds have been bulky, I've had to use the ear fins no matter what tips I've used because they just kind of fall out of my ears. So I really like silicone. With the Comply foam tips, whether it's sport or isolation or whatever, you get a very slight drop in mids and highs. I am somewhat of an audiophile, and so I really notice it. A lot of people aren't going to notice that, but I really pick up on the mids and the highs. So the clarity is toned down just a hair with Comply foam tips, but again, they give such good comfort and isolation. It's worth that trade-off. But I do like using the silicone tips, and again, this is the first pair of Jaybird Sport earphones that I've been able to use the silicone tips, so I like that. With the earphones, you also get a retaining clip and the strap retention devices, which are actually still in the bag. And what those do is they allow the straps to kind of go like this behind your head, and so it shortens the cable and kind of tucks the controller in. So I mentioned that the battery is in the controller. That makes the controller a little bit bulky. It's a little bit more weighty than with the past Jaybird Sport earphones. So if you're a runner, this might be a little bit too dangly if you don't use the strap retention devices. So you may want to do that, again, to fold up the cord a little bit behind your head. If you're a cyclist, it's not really that big of a deal. If it bothers you and you don't want to use the strap retention devices, I found that you can put these underneath your helmet strap and it will tuck the controller in. The only downside is that it's a little bit harder to reach the controller, so I kind of like it dangling around. Again, on a bike, it doesn't really matter that it does dangle around. And finally, you get your USB charging cable with the charging clip. The charging clip will snap on the back of the controller, and this is twofold. One is it does your charging, and this, by the way, is a USB micro B, so it's the same as most Android phones. So to charge it, you would just plug this into the computer, and it charges the charging clip and it charges the earphones at the same time. So you get about 4 hours of listening time with the earphones if you didn't have the charging clip snapped on the back. And by the way, these charge in about an hour and a half from 0 all the way up to 100%. Now the neat thing about the charging clip is when you snap this on, assuming the charging clip itself is charged, you will get an additional 4 hours of listening time. Now this is obviously a little bit bulky, so for sports, you know, it's going to probably be too heavy and weighty if you're moving around a lot. But it is nice to get an additional 4 hours of listening. Now 4 hours is not that much, but for most sporting activities, I think it's going to be plenty. You're just going to end up charging them a little bit more frequently than you did with the X2s or the Blue Buds X. When you're charging the earphones, you're going to get a red light and it'll turn green when they're fully charged. The same with the clip. There's a little light on the side. Now because these are not plugged in, you can't see it, but it's right here, and again it'll be red, and when it hits full charge, it'll go green. Now I want to mention the positioning of the earphones because this is important. You would not want to have these straight up, and in fact it shows this in the owner's manual. You need to rock these a little bit out to the side because what this does is it tilts the earphones forward and they fit in your ear canal really nicely. So I want to show how these fit in your ear with the ear fins. So I just put them right in, and that ear fin goes right into that part of your ear and fits really securely. And like I said, I get a really good seal with the silicone tips, and I don't have to do much maneuvering. I just really pop them right in and they'll stay. The same with the sport tips, the Comply Foam Sport or the Comfort tips, which like I said, I prefer. I don't have to really squeeze the foam. You can do that, and sometimes you'll get a better seal that way, but I get a really good seal with the foam tips just by placing them in my ear. The controller on this works just like other Jaybird Sport earphones. The middle button is your play pause, and it's also to answer calls. So if you've got a call coming in, you can tap it, it'll answer the call. If you tap it again, it'll hang up the call. If you double tap it, it will redial. The top button, and you can't really see it in the video, I don't think, but it's got a plus, and the bottom one has a minus. The plus is your volume up, so every time you tap it, the volume's going to go up one. And if you hold it down for 2 seconds, it's going to skip forward to the next song. The same with the minus button, that's volume down, and that's to go back. To power these on, you're going to hold down the middle button for about 2 seconds, and you'll see you get a green light come on. And what's new about these is when Jenna comes on, I think that's what they still call her, she'll actually announce your battery level, and I believe it's 20% increments. It's either 10 or 20, but I think it's 20. So she'll say power on, and Jenna has a little bit more of a party attitude now, but she'll say power on, you get a little bit of music, she'll say headphones connected, and then she'll announce the battery level again in 20% increments. And to turn the earphones off, you would just hold down the middle button for about 5 or 6 seconds. Jenna will say power off. I want to point out something that's a little interesting if you're an Android user, and that is the volume rockers on the phone will do this exact same thing that the volume buttons do on the headphones. And so if I tap this, you get this little graphic and you can see the volume going up. If I do the volume adjust on the earphones and these are on and playing music, it'll adjust the volume. So They work the same. The X2s are a little different. I'm going to pair the X2s and I'm going to show how they interact with the software of an Android phone. So I've got the X2s paired, and they will interact with the phone differently in that you adjust the volume level of the phone separately with the volume rockers on the phone. So you've got that little graphic again. But if I push the volume buttons on the X2s, it's adjusting the volume within the earphones, not within the phone. So again, I just wanted to point that out. It's a little bit differently the way they interact with the software of Android. Now I want to show the app that you can use with these, and this is a really neat feature that is new for the Freedom. So I'm going to open this app. That's what the icon looks like right there. And first of all, you'll see in the bottom right, you'll see an exact battery percentage. So I said that when you turn the earphones on, it announces a battery percentage in 10 or 20% increments. I think it's 20. Whereas you get an exact reading in the app. So it'll tell you what battery level you're at, and I'm at 50. I mean, it's exact, so it'll go 49, 48. The other thing is that you can set the equalizer of the earphones, and it adjusts the firmware. So I would go to Customize, and then I can adjust the highs, and you can change it pretty specifically. So I can move this around and get different levels, and it does it instantaneously, and it does it in live listening mode. So you're actually listening to the music change. So once you get it to where you want it, you would hit save, and it actually adjusts the firmware of the earphones. So if I were to pair these to another device, so my iPad, let's say, it keeps the same equalizer settings until I would open an app and change them again. So that's really nice that you don't have to open the app for other devices and change it, because it'll lock it in to the firmware. The other thing about the app that's really cool is you can tap on this icon and you can look at other sponsored athletes and musicians and see what they use. So for example, if you wanted to see what Fuzzy Hall uses for his settings, you can tap on that. You can go to preview, so you would be listening to the music with his equalizer settings. If you like it, you can hit save. Again, it'll lock it into the firmware of the earphones. So that's the app. When listening to the Freedoms, I get very little drops in the music. I had some issues with the X2s dropping out, and so I would have to either repair or tap the center button and connect it back with the music, get the music going again. Very little issues with these. It was interesting, one time I was out on a ride, and every time I looked down, it would skip the music a little bit, it would drop. And I was using a Garmin, so I don't know if there was a Bluetooth interference with the Garmin or if there was an interference with power lines, but I moved the phone over to my right pocket. The controller is on the right side, and I didn't have the issue anymore. So that little bit of a range difference fixed the issue. So that's a little tip for you if you're a cyclist and you've got that issue with the phone in your back pocket. Put it on the right side. Now, you do get a pretty good range with these. I'd say 30 to 40 feet. At work, I had my phone sitting at my desk, and I walked 2 rooms over, and it stayed connected. So again, I think there may have been some interference when I had the phone in my pocket. Now I want to talk about the sound quality of these, because the sound quality of these is hands down the best Bluetooth earphones that I have listened to date. The X2s were very close. And I said I want to do a little bit of comparison with the X2, so I'll do that as I talk about sound quality. First, focusing on the Freedoms, the mids are very clear, very forward. I get really good sound stage with these. Definitely the best sound stage that I've ever had with a pair of Bluetooth earphones. The mids, like I said, are forward, and the treble is very clear. Great clarity on these, no sibilance or harshness in the treble, and the bass itself is very clean. Like I said, with the silicone ear tips and the Comply foam, the isolation tips or the comfort tips. I prefer the comfort, and the isolation tips are a little bit too long for me, and they bend over a little bit and block the sound. That's why I really prefer the comfort tips. And like I said before, the sport tips that come with these do not give as tight of a seal because they're more porous. So you don't get as good of a bass response with the sport tips, but with the silicone tips, especially with the ear fins, I get a super tight seal. It stays in place, and you need that tight seal if you like the bass response. Again, the bass is very clean. Comparing to the X2s, the Bass is still very strong in the X2s, but the Freedoms are a little bit more clear, and again, the mids are a little bit more forward. I use my Dunu DN1000s, which is a wired earphone, to compare sound quality, and I would say the Freedoms are in the same ballpark of clarity with the Dunu DN1000s, which is saying a lot because these are very clear. This is a $200 pair of wired earphones, and these are very clear. So sound quality is superb on the Jaybird Freedoms. Now let me talk about the one issue that I've had with these, and honestly it somewhat dampens my listening experience with the earphones, and that is the fact that I cannot get the right volume level. And this is the first pair of earphones that I've used that I've had this issue. What I mean by that is, if you were to say the lowest volume level is a 1, the next up is a 2, the next up is a 3. Right between the 2 and the 3 there is a large jump. Now it does not happen at the higher volume levels, it's only at the lower end. In fact, let me show you what I mean using my iPad. So on my iPad, when I'm listening to music, if I go all the way down, like I said, I consider that number 1. That's number 2. That's a little bit too soft. If I go up to number 3, it's a little bit too loud for me. It may be no big deal for a lot of you out there, but I am really meticulous about the exact volume level, more so than I thought before I actually encountered this issue. Now, I want to say that I've also had this issue with my Nexus 6P. I paired it with an iPhone 5S and of course my iPad, and I have the same issue. So it's not the device, it is the earphone. Now the good news is, if you're using the Comply Foam Sport Tips, you probably won't have this issue, because with the Sport Tips, they're a little bit more porous. So like I said earlier, I don't get as good of a seal or sound isolation, but what that does is it causes you to raise the volume a little bit to get the appropriate volume level. It's just with the silicone tips and the Comply Foam Comfort Tips, because they get such a tight seal, I can use, and I need to use, lower volume levels. With the Sport Tips, again, you're going to have a higher volume level, and like I said, the modulation is not as big of an issue. In fact, it's not an issue at all once you get above that level 3, so then the modulation is more appropriate. Now I hope this is something that Jaybird Sport can fix with a firmware update, because I would give these a 100% recommendation if it weren't for that issue. Is the volume level issue a deal breaker for you? Well, it's going to depend on your own preferences. How meticulous are you about your exact listening volume, and where do you like your listening volume? Also, it's going to depend on the tips that you use. Like I said, with the Comply Foam Sport Tips, you're not going to have that issue. Now these are a $200 earphone. That's what they retail for, and that's probably what they're going to stay around until a newer model comes out. Now when I was looking for a really high quality pair of wired earphones, I went through quite a few before I got to my Dunu DN1000s. I started off with maybe a $40 or $50 earphone up to $100, $150. So I went through quite a few, and I probably would have saved a lot of money if I just went ahead and invested in the Dunu DN1000s to get that sound quality and build quality that I was looking for. I look at it the same way with these. If you really care a lot about your music sound quality and you want the features that you can get in these, then you're probably going to save some money if you just invest in these and not go through a lot of different ones. So it's going to depend on your budget and things like that. I would, for the most part, recommend these. Use your own judgment as far as that volume level issue. Like I said, I hope Jaybird Sport really will correct that with a firmware update. If they do, these are absolutely perfect as far as every quality and aspect that I would look for in a Bluetooth earphone. So that's going to wrap it up. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Thanks for watching.